Welcome to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm Ed Holinsky. Glad you could join us here today. We have this gentleman on the road coming to us from New Hampshire, still keeping very active in his life. A Kenmore West graduate, a Kenmore West Hall of Famer, Ithaca College standout and Hall of Famer, a terrific coaching career at Elmira College to start off with, and of course, a seven-time Stanley Cup winner, the one and the only Barry Smith. Barry, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Kenmore West guy. For those of us who've been living under a rock, don't use Google, and aren't familiar with you, tell us about yourself and growing up in Kenmore, please.
Yeah, well, I grew up in I was born in 1950 and grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was a tremendous situation we had. I lived right across from Herbert Hoover, school, and we had playgrounds. We had the Delaware pool. We had everything you could possibly have as a kid. I mean, it was just fantastic.
How did you get involved with sports? Was it through organized sports, or were you a sandlot kid?
Well, pretty much, Ed, as we all grew up, we played everywhere, in the streets, backyards, wiffle ball, kickball, you name it. So my father was a little league football coach, and he was coaching neighborhood kids for my older brother, who was 4 years older. And so it was just natural for me to follow in and play for his teams, which was a great honor. And we had a lot of good teams, and we had kids from all over the neighborhoods come in to play. And then from there, I went on to play junior high football and sports, and then, of course, in high school.
You played for the legendary Jules Yakupovich. What was that experience like?
Actually, he was way ahead of his time. I mean, for a football coach to have a two platoon system way back then, and we didn't have a lot of gifted athletes. It wasn't like we had a tremendous athletic group to pull from. So he took a lot of smaller players. He had a system where it was the radar defense. So it was, trying to avoid contact, read the play. He was just very innovative, and I was lucky that he let small players play because I wasn't big.
You played on the offensive side, running back slash slot back. How was it practicing against the radar defense week in and week out during the season? Or did you go against conventional defense?
We did both, actually, because you sort of have a team that was set up for who you're going to play next, whether it's North Tonawanda, whatever it was. And then the radar defense was, I said, sort of revolutionary because he had players standing up and not down into the actual, stances. And a lot of smaller guys were quite successful playing this game.
How much enjoyment did you get on the offensive side of the ball, frustrating the defenses, because you had a multiple offense. You were throwing the ball all over the place and running it, and for that time, it was pretty much a wide open offense.
Yeah, actually, we beat superior teams because of it. We had good execution, as you said. It was innovative, and our athletes were not as big as some, and we weren't playing on both sides of the ball, so maybe we were fresher. Think about it. It's a two platoon system.
Besides Kenmore East, which was probably definitely your biggest rival, what were some of the other teams that stood out from the Niagara Frontier League?
Well, there was a lot of good athletes back then. And you had the newspaper, which covered high school sports quite well. So I would say that, Tonawanda was a big opponent, North Tonawanda. You had different teams based upon what year it was for who's going to be the better team. And then, of course, Kenmore East was always the biggest game because that was the biggest rivalry you had, West East. So it was just, I can't tell you if there was a bigger rivalry than East West. No, but we had some good athletes out there that played for a lot of teams.
Did it make any difference to you at that point, playing against the Trots and the LaSalles or the Lockports or the Niagara Falls or the North Tonawandas or the Tonawandas? Because you had quite the mixture of small and big schools back then.
Yeah, we didn't have any categories of based upon enrollments. And then some of the schools weren't really established by that point in time. So you didn't have Orchard Park established as they became, a very good sports school. And, we didn't play the Catholic schools at that time, so I couldn't tell you how good they may have been. You had Cardinal O'Hara and Canisius and St. Joe's, so I don't really know. I didn't really have a chance to play against those teams, so I couldn't tell you how good they were.
Was Coach Jakubovic a stickler on having the guys in shape? Did he run you guys quite often, make sure that you had your cardio and
we practiced well. We practiced very detailed. It was a very detailed practice. And maybe, Ed, because we played a two-platoon system, we didn't have to be in elite shape, but we were always in good shape. And for whatever position you played, I found that it was excellent. I mean, it was a great background. I mean, he could have been a college coach quite easily.
Going forward, did you take anything, any pieces of advice or coaching styles from him?
I would say detail for position, detail for execution. Yeah, I definitely would say that.
What were some of the things that you didn't like about some of the practices or playing for Coach Jakubovic?
Honestly, God, I couldn't tell you there was anything that was a negative for me because I had a lot of friends on the team. When you're successful, you always feel good about what you're doing, and we had success. So I don't really have any negativity whatsoever about the football program. Besides
football, you played hockey at hockey and I don't know, high school or local junior.
No, there was no high school hockey at that time, and the rinks that we had available where I grew up was outdoor rinks. You had Lincoln and you had Brighton, which were the two rinks. So you played outside most of the time. Then when you played inside, you went to Fort Erie or possibly some other location. We played in the Canadian League because that was the only league that really had juniors. So you played across the border. And at that time, there's no problem going across the border, play at any point in time. So we just played teams all over the place, sort of in the Horseshoe League. And yeah, we were successful.
What other sports did you play in high school? Were you a baseball guy? Or I know you played lacrosse.
No, we didn't have lacrosse. There wasn't a coach or a teacher. I think he was a history teacher who had played lacrosse in college and had a sort of a club. But I didn't get into lacrosse until college. But we played baseball. I was on the baseball team. I did gymnastics, I think, when I was a sophomore in high school, which was fun to do. And then I swam or dove a little bit in ninth grade when I was back at Hoover.
Do you believe that athletes should do multiple sports?
Yes, I think that's when you don't have multiple sports in your background, you lose some creativity or even, I would say, hockey sense or baseball sense or whatever sports sense it is, because your best athletes were cross sports athletes. I mean, because it gave you more possibilities to do other things besides just the same sport. I think also mentally it creates ability to think. You have to react to different situations because it's a different sport. You have to figure out what's the best way to be successful. So I think it gives you much more creativity to be a multi-sport athlete.
You went on to Ithaca College. You played for the legendary Coach Butterfield. I believe it was his first year when you went down to Ithaca at that point. I believe he came on in 1967. It could have been a year beforehand. You were a 3-year letterman, 69, 70, and 71. You ended up being, at that point, 4th all-time in receptions. What was that experience like at Ithaca for you?
It was the right size school for me to go to. It was the right level of athletics for me to go to because it wasn't Division I. It wasn't like a Big Ten school where I was being outplayed by superior athletes. It was a great setup. We had good coaching staff. As you know, back then, all freshmen had to play JV. There was no freshman on the varsity, which I think was a pretty good situation. So you everybody started in the same place. And then, of course, sophomore year, you have a chance to make varsity, which I did and had a chance to play. And playing for Butterfield was a lot of fun. We had some good teams. We played a lot of good opponents, a lot of variation of opponents, and it was a very good experience.
Did you have Division I offers coming out of Kenmore West?
Not really. No, not really. I think I was trying to go to Colgate, but I had to retake I think, my SATs, and I sort of looked at Colgate. My older brother, Neil, was an excellent football player, and he played at Boston University. And I went out there for an interview, but I just thought Ithaca was the right place to go. And that was the place that probably wanted me. Boston University, I'd probably been a walk-on. And Colgate, I'm not quite sure. I didn't get in, so I didn't have a chance to see what was going to happen.
I assume your junior background in hockey got you playing at Ithaca College, and you played at Ithaca College, and you were the captain of the team at your senior year. What was that experience like playing? Was Ithaca back then a Division III or Division II?
Well, see, we didn't have Division III back then. You had either Division I or you had the next level of teams. I don't think real true Division III didn't come into when I was at Elmira College, maybe my second or third year, where really there was a huge discrepancy between financial aid based upon need or athleticism, which was Division III versus I or II. So we just weren't a Big Ten school, or we weren't a high Division I football team. But there wasn't Division III then.
What was your hockey experience like at Ithaca?
We didn't have our own facility, which was too bad because it could have really been a big-time sport at Ithaca. We had to use Cornell's rink. And because we used Cornell's rink, we never had really quality ice time. We took the ice time they gave us, which was at night, odd times. So I would say to you, the hockey program is handicapped without having their own rink and setup.
You also played lacrosse at Ithaca as well, too, which is rather unique because you were a three-sport guy in college, which doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Well, actually, in lacrosse, if you could run and defend and get ground balls, you could be a midi. So you didn't have to be a superior skilled guy. I'm not playing attack, and I could run and I could get ground balls. And I could play defense. So I could play midi for him. It was a good situation. I played JV because I really got tired of spring football. I didn't see any merit in spring football when you go out and practice and never play a game. So I got into lacrosse because of that.
What was your educational life at Ithaca? Were you an education major? Were you going to become a teacher?
Yes, I was. I was a physical education. I took special ed as well. And then I stayed for my extra year after I graduated to take kinesiology of exercise for my master's. But I changed that later on for secondary education.
You also then, when you came back after Ithaca experience, you played a couple of years for the Twin City Geminis. What was that experience like?
Well, that was a fun get-together because then we had players from all over the place. They're all Buffalonians who had played for a variety of colleges, and we had a variety of ages. We had some guys who were 10 years older than, I was. And then you had the guys that I knew from the different schools who I played against. And that was a good get-together. We had some travel teams we played. You went out, you practiced during the week, you play in the weekend, have a big party afterwards. It was a pretty good social situation.
Who were some of the quarterbacks on those teams?
Well, you had George Dermasic, who was, I think, a Tonawanda teacher for a long time, or I'm not quite sure what he taught. I remember that, Paul Fraunhofer was a very huge character on the team. We had a lot of good athletes. We had a quarterback from Sweet Home who was excellent. I'll try to think of his name in a second, but we had different athletes from all over the place. We had the Havistros. We had, I had a guy, Pete Allen, who played with me at Ithaca. So we had a variety of guys. It was a good get-together. So it wasn't just you played football. We go out for beers afterwards as well. So it was a little bit different than college.
Was that way, playing for the Geminis, was that your way of not taking off the helmet and the pads?
Well, it was right in my backyard because we played over in Tonawanda, and I was with friends. At that time, we passed the ball more than even we did at Ithaca, so I had a chance to catch more passes and have a little bit more fun, without just blocking or trying to run. So it was a good pass offense. I had a chance to really have fun doing that position, return punts or kicks, it was a good get together.
You told me a few weeks ago that you coached also some high school football. I don't know at what level. What was that experience like, and what kind of athletes were you coaching at that point?
After I graduated and stayed from my graduate year, I then went to work at Germantown Academy, which was outside of Philadelphia. And I was an assistant football coach. We started the hockey program there, and I was the head lacrosse coach, as well as teaching at the school. It's a great setup. It was a nice prep school. They played in the main line. It had a lot of heritage to it. And it was a good 2 years. I had a great athletic director and a lot of quality people around me. So I never went to a private school. I'd never been a part of a private school. I was a public school kid. So it was a whole different environment.
Did you aspire at that point to become a coach? And how did you determine it was going to be hockey over football, or even lacrosse?
There's a big differential. Lacrosse could have continued, but football. When I was a graduate student, we had meetings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on the road to go watch your opponent. Then Saturday come back and put your films together, get it organized. So it was meetings. And as a player, I never had all these meetings, but as a coach, we had every single night. I'm thinking this isn't a whole lot of fun. So and you play one day a week. So if you lose, you're high for 5 days. If you lose, you're down for 5 days. But in hockey, you're playing more than one game. You're not having all these meetings, and the practices were more fun. So I decided to stay with hockey coaching.
You then went over to overseas. I believe you were assistant coach in Norway for a couple of years. What was that experience like going overseas and coaching over in Europe?
Actually, it was after my 6th year in Elmira College.
I stand corrected. Yes,
Okay.
Let's
so
backtrack.
what I wanted to do, Ed, is I wanted to improve my coaching knowledge, and I wanted to learn European hockey because there's an awful lot of talk about the Russian hockey, European hockey. The Swedes were doing quite well, Finns were doing well, the Czechs had teams. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go over to Europe. And I had taken a course in the summer in Sweden. It was at a college called Busern about hockey and different athletics to try to improve myself. Met some people when I was there in Sweden. And then I got a job in northern Sweden. And I took my wife, and at that time, my son, who was, probably 4 or 5 years old, I think. He went with us, flew into Stockholm Airport, got picked up by the ownership group, and they drove me all the way up to a place called Östersund, which is the northern part of Sweden. And that's where I stayed for 2 years and coached. Then I went down to southern Sweden to Ängelholm, and then I went over to Norway for 2 seasons.
You had quite the coaching career at Elmira College. Spent 6 years there, ended up getting your master's degree there. First of all, how did you land that gig, and how did you make that program so successful in such a short amount of time?
My younger brother, David, was playing for Elmira College at the time, and their coach had just left. And so he told me about it, and it was a perfect size school for me to start at. Plus, he was already there. I knew some of the players. So I interviewed, and I was very lucky to get the job as a young coach. So I left Germantown Academy and went to Elmira College. My first year was not good at all. I did a poor job of coaching, of managing the team, and we were not very successful in the first year. So I said, we've got to change this. So I went over to Russia. I took a course, sport and culture in Moscow. Tarasov was one of the teachers there, who was the father of Russian hockey. So I learned some of the off-ice techniques of coaching, some things they did on ice. I came back determined I was going to change the team. We brought in, I think, 13 freshmen, took some transitional players from the previous year. My brother's one of them. And we just took off from there. There was no more. It was a hard regimentation. The guys picked up on it. And we just played very, very good hockey, and we trained exceptionally hard.
Then you went over to Europe. When you came back or were looking for jobs back in North America, Did you spend any time or were hired by any NHL teams that sent you to the AHL to coach?
Um, I was in Norway my second year and got a phone call from the Buffalo Sabres. And I think it was Jerry Meehan. And Scotty Bowman was the general manager at the time and took over the coaching staff because he had let Schoenfeld go. So Jim Schoenfeld was let go in February, got a phone call in February, and asked if I wanted to be the assistant coach of the Buffalo Sabres. So I was able to get out of my Norwegian job, fly into Buffalo, and join the team in 1986, second half of the season, probably late February. And that's where I started my NHL career.
You never spent any time in the AHL.
No, I did not. I went right into Buffalo. I coached there. And then I went into Pittsburgh with Bob Johnson, who was the famous, USA coach, Wisconsin. I coached with him for the first year in Pittsburgh, won the Cup that year. And then he came ill and he passed the following year after Thanksgiving. And then Scotty Bowman came in to help. He was working, I think, as player personnel and then took over the head coach position. And I stayed with him for 2 more years.
How receptive were some of these NHL coaches to your background, your European background? It's a tough nut when you're dealing with probably the greatest coach of all time in Scotty Bowman and trying to give him advice or give him ideas.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, he was an amazing coach, much like you talk about, being an innovator, much like Jules Jakupovic. Scotty's definitely that for hockey. We just got along and he tested me and I enjoyed working for him and I learned a lot. He gave me a lot, the better a job I did, the more I was able to do. And we had different assistant coaches who joined us. Each team that you have has a different personality, that different leadership and different backgrounds. So, Buffalo is probably the hardest because I came in cold. And then Pittsburgh, I came in with the new head coach at the same time. So both of us started together. And then in Detroit, I came in with Scotty from Pittsburgh to Detroit. And that first year transition wasn't easy, but, he was able to get the team to where he wanted to be able to compete and play in the playoffs. And then we became successful.
Why do you think back in the 80s, under Bowman, the Sabres weren't successful?
I think they didn't win a cup, but they had some good teams. They had some good players. Perhaps they were, a player short or they had a young team at that time. We had a lot of young players. Don't forget, Brasso was just out of high school. Housley, you had Tucker, Chuck. You had Creighton. You had a lot of young players that went along with Gilles Perreault, who retired, So it was a transitional time, and I think that Scotty would have been successful if he would have stayed with it.
How hard is it to win a Stanley Cup? You've been there.
Well, if it was easy, you'd have a lot more people with cups. I'll tell you that. It's one of the hardest. I think it is the hardest trophy to win. I mean, I've heard that it's the most difficult, grueling playoff series of any sport to obtain the finalization of the Stanley Cup. You need luck. You need to play the right opponents. You have to have so much go your way. Stay healthy. I mean, that's why it's such a Cinderella story to win it.
Do you miss the everyday grind of the NHL?
It changed. The game has changed. It changed with computers. It changed with how you observe a game after the game. It's changed to what your meeting structures are like. I think it has to change on the ice practice-wise, but that will come. But it's become almost like a corporation now. I mean, the last job I had was Chicago behind the bench again. Everybody had their own computer, had their own little seating area. There was very little, of collaboration between all the coaches. You have the PK. You're not worried about the power play. I have the power play. I'm not worried about the PK. You're coaching defense. You're not worried about the offense. I'm coaching the forwards. That's not the correct way to go. I think if you're going to be successful in the NHL, everybody has to be a part of everything. I don't think you can branch out and have, a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, special teams coach like you have in football, running back coach. It's too diversified. It's a team.
In your estimation, are the athletes bigger, stronger, faster in
I would
hockey
say
today?
I would say they're bigger, stronger, faster, but not as smart, and sometimes not as dedicated, or maybe not have as big a heart.
Is that the difference of a mediocre player to a great player? Is the heart?
The heart and the head, because you talked about it earlier, not playing multiple sports. And now today you can go by any ball field and there's nobody on the field. There's nobody playing in the streets today. There's nobody in the backyards. They don't see people, at the garage playing, pickup hockey. So we've become watching iPads, computers, watching YouTube. So I think today's player is not nearly as creative or as smart as the players of yesteryear, and I don't think they have the same willpower to be part of a team. There's a lot of separation now. There's a lot of notoriety being an individual. Back then, there was no notoriety being an individual. You were a team guy. There's a big difference in mentality.
Of the 7 Stanley Cups that you were a part of, which one was your favorite?
Well, to be honest with you, Ed, the 2 cups I won in Chicago, I was not a coach on the bench.
And you were player development. Yes.
Yeah. So in essence, it's a whole different flavor of being in the crowd clapping and not on the bench, doing anything. So it's great that Chicago was a tremendous experience, but I wasn't on the bench coaching it. So there's a differential in the 5 cups you win on the bench versus being a part of something. And probably the first cup we won was in Pittsburgh. And I told this story the other day. It was Jim McNally's group he called the Mouse Pack. It's a lot of Kenmore West and Kenmore East guys that go there. And most of them are older than I was. But it's a tremendous group. And there's about 90 people at dinner at DePaulo's restaurant that he puts on every year. So I just told the story of, I'm in Pittsburgh. We're playing Minnesota. We're in game 6 for the Stanley Cup Finals. We're up 3-2. After period 2, we're up 6-0. And Bob Johnson comes to me and says, what do we say between the second and third period? And I said, what do we say? I'm scared to go in there. I mean, we can't jinx this, can we? What do we say to these guys? We're already up by 6. And we can't be the first team in history ever to go down and lose a 6-goal lead. So he says, would you want to go in there and say something? I said, no, I don't want to go in there and say something. You go in there and say something. He goes, what the hell am I going to say? Bob, I don't know. Let's just play 20 minutes and get this thing over with. So he goes, okay. So the trainer comes out and says, okay, coaches, the guys are waiting for you, 4 minutes before the period starts. So Bob walks in and says, whatever the hell you guys are doing, keep it going. Let's go. We won 8-0.
Great story. Did you ever pinch yourself? You say, a kid from Kenmore West, and you say, I've accomplished quite a bit in my life.
Not really. No, I don't. In fact, I learned early on, I don't even wear a ring after you win it, because it's almost like, okay, that's it. You always want to win the next one. So I didn't want to try to be, showy about it or just talk about, oh, we won no, because you always want to win the next one. You want to try to improve yourself. And it's almost like a jinx, saying, okay, I hang everything up. I got pictures everywhere. No, it was just trying to get the next one. And now that I'm not coaching with the team, I'm enjoying a whole different aspect of the sport, because I'm working with amateur teams, amateur coaches, and going around and working in the field. And actually, I'm learning a lot more about player development, working with younger players. I'm on the ice with 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, high schools, junior teams, college teams, and listening to the coaches from that side of it. It's good, because it makes you think about what's the most important thing you can teach these guys. So it's a whole different development thing for me right now mentally.
How do you do that without these coaches, these amateur coaches, being in awe or intimidated by you?
Just the way you treat them. I mean, you don't want to come in like saying you know everything, because I'm still learning, and I'm trying to improve. Ed, we talked about hockey sense, hockey IQ, basketball sense, basketball IQ, football quarterback IQ. So there's a mental part of the game. And because hockey is a 5-player plus goalie, 6-man unit, you have to work in collaboration with other players. So why do some players fit into any team? It's because they have the ability to assist or support whoever they play with. They understand the game. Others can't. They're physical specimens. Like you talked about, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, better nutriments, but they can't think the game. So I'm trying to improve. We have all kinds of skill coaches out in the field today. We have guys that teach skating, they teach puck handling, they teach shooting. And those are all individual skills that you have to have. But who's teaching how do you play with somebody else? How do you read the game? And that's the difference of high-end players versus mediocre players, is they think the game. They react. They see and react accordingly.
You talk about thinking the game. You coach with somebody who was probably the greatest one of all, in Wayne Gretzky. How was that experience, or describe that experience of coaching with Wayne Gretzky in Phoenix?
Well, he was a gifted player mentally. He wasn't gifted physically, size-wise or strength-wise. He just had, tremendous assets in his sight, pass, ability to put the puck where he wanted to, read the play. Those people are superior athletes. Mario Lemieux, they're superior. Anybody who's at that highest level has a whole different perceptual thing that us normal people don't have. And he was a bit frustrated at times because as he was trying to coach, he couldn't figure out why the guy couldn't see the play. Well, why didn't he make that pass? Because he had no idea it was there. That's why he didn't see it. So, and he had limited time as a coach. He was being torn in a lot of different directions. He had a lot of things he had to take care of. Whereas if you're a head coach today, you've got to be almost 24/7 locked into, that team. And he just didn't have the time to do it all together.
Many people have asked me this question to ask you. Why didn't you become an NHL head coach?
I'm not sure my personality, and I don't know. Sometimes people think they're better in the job slot they have because I was able to do what I did well. And then if you become a head coach, you have to change it over, have to work with the media a tremendous amount of time. So you're taken out of the game. I mean, you don't understand how much time these head coaches have to spend either with media, supporters, different interview groups. It just drains you. It really is. It's not easy today. And I just didn't care for that part of the game. I like the X's and O's. I like being in the room with the guys. I like being on the ice for practice. I probably love that the most. And I didn't want to deal with the media.
Would you change anything in your career?
I'd probably change what I did in Chicago doing player development. I would have worked on more of the mental aspect I just told you about, the creativity part of it, more so than just the actual skill part. Because I had a couple of players that I sort of left on the table. They had great physical assets, they had good skills, but they couldn't think the game, and I wasn't able at that time to teach them. So now I've gotten better at that.
Would you change anything with your own athletic career? You're going back to Kenmore West and Ithaca College.
Well, I was lucky because I was small. I wasn't extremely talented in any one sport. I was just lucky to be able to play. I wish I threw the ball more at Ithaca because I really enjoyed catching it, but we didn't quite have that real run and gun offense. That's why when I played for the Geminis, it was a lot of fun because you're catching 7 or 8 passes a game. It was great, but no, I wouldn't change anything from my athletic background. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time with the right coaches, and I was lucky to start my pro career with a guy like Scotty Bowman and Bob Johnson. I mean, tremendous teachers.
What advice would you give today's athlete?
Well, first of all, you talked about as a young athlete, I'd want to cross over sports. I wouldn't want to play one sport. Secondly, I think you can't just watch highlights of any sport and say the game, because today everybody watches YouTube, and what are they watching? They're watching who had the prettiest goal or the most amazing catch or the most amazing thing. Nobody watches the grunt, who makes amazing block or, gives up their body on a kickoff return. No, everything is celebration highlight now, and that's not how the game is. That's a very, very small detail part of a game.
You live, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you live in Phoenix, Arizona in the off season. Are you glad that you're?
I'm there 6 months out of the year, so that's my main residence. 6, yeah, 6
Are you
plus.
glad that you're not there right about now because of all the blazing heat?
You don't understand how hard it is to live there. Holy smokes! I mean, I take my hat off to those people. You have to change your whole lifestyle. You have to worry about where you park your car. You have to worry about what hats you have on. You have to worry about it's tough, and it doesn't go away. It's one thing when it's cold. Let's go back and get another coat. Let's go back and get another hat. When it's hot, there's nothing more to take off.
If you get a phone call from an NHL team and they're looking for an assistant coach, are you going?
No. I've been there. It's a grueling situation. It's a lot of hours, and I like what I'm doing now in the teaching aspect of it. So, no, I don't anticipate going back. I'll go back for help in training camp. I'll go back and help them for a short time, but I don't want to be locked in again. No.
Would you go back for player development?
Yeah, I would do that as long as I could get on the ice more with them. The problem you have with player development is this. If you're in college, I cannot go on the ice with you because of the NCAA regulations. So I can watch you from the stands. I can talk to you through your coach because you have to have, he's your main guy. So there's sort of a barrier in what exactly you're going to do with somebody. And you've got to be sure that you have a relationship with the team's coaches because they don't want you telling this athlete something completely different than they're doing because then it's counterproductive to what they want, So that building process is really fictitious because you only have a hands-on so much. So I try to change what I could actually do for a player to help their development more than just watching them periodically.
When you talk about development, is it easier or how do you approach players that are in college, players in junior, players who are European and overseas?
There's a difference. You're correct. I mean, each European player has a little different mentality. Some players are a little bit more difficult to build a relationship with because they're a little bit more wary. You have language discrepancies, with the Russians and possibly a Czech who doesn't speak English. And your easier players are like the Swedes because they speak English and they're very social with this, So each country has their own, how would I say, brand of character that you have to work through and try to build a relationship with.
How many languages does Barry Smith speak?
English. I can speak some Russian. I can speak much better Swedish, understand Norwegian. That's it.
How would you like Barry Smith to be remembered? As a kid from Kenmore West or a great NHL assistant coach? Or where do you slide in?
Kenmore West, a kid from Kenmore West that had a chance to go out and see the world. I'm still a guy from Kenmore. That's why I come back to Buffalo every summer.
Barry Smith, this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank you so much for taking the time from New Hampshire to sit down with me and do some reminiscing. I wish you well. Thank you so much.
And thanks, Ed. You sent me a video of the 1972 Twin City Geminis. I couldn't figure out in that video, what the hell am I watching?
Some of those videos we don't get the best quality sometimes, when they're sitting in the can for all these years. They disintegrated. And when you try to digitize these things, sometimes they work out well, sometimes they don't work out well. It's who the camera operator was at the time as well. A lot of it difference as well.
I was just trying to figure out. I wasn't quite sure what I was watching. I didn't know if I was the white team or the yellow team, and I was trying to figure.
Well, that's the beauty of it. That's where you got to dig into the gray matter to figure that out. You know that.
Okay, all right.
And then I sent you some of the Kenmore West as well too that you played North Tonawanda, and those were terrific games. And that was a terrific rivalry that you guys had. And guys like Chuck Williams before he passed away. Talking with him, to this day it still drove him crazy how Jakubovic could adjust on the fly and could dissect the defense in a heartbeat. I mean, it was amazing what the Kenmore West program could do.
Yeah. As I said, Jules is way ahead of his time.
So much so. Barry, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, thanks, Ed. You have a good one. Yeah, we'll talk again. Let me know if you need anything else.
All right.
Okay, thank you.